Hello. So I hope I don't sound like a broken record with this because I know that over the last month, race-related issues have been quite dominant on my channel. Certainly not the only thing I talk about. I talk about a whole range of things: geopolitics, East-West relations. That occasionally do film reviews. I try to cover a wide range of things, whatever's on my mind. This has been hard to avoid over the last month and a half. Um, So I want to talk about something quite specific, and it is the position of so-called white allies. Um, and again, that's a term that they would probably use themselves, allies, that is. I mean, it's not a pejorative term, it's something that would be seen as a positive. So I'm thinking of those people. And let me just prefix this. I'm not telling anyone else how they should think. I'm certainly not playing the game of wanting to cancel anyone or censor anyone. That's for intolerant woke activists to play. That's not what I'm saying. However, I do maintain the right to criticize and to say that I think they're wrong. So, by white allies, let me be very, very clear what I mean here. I'm not talking about white people who stand against racism or stand up for issues affecting black people, because that's a wide spectrum, right? Um, there are white activists in history I have a lot of admiration for. I mean, during the civil rights movement, there was two two figures at least who actually died for their role in the civil rights movement. One was a young woman from Detroit, Viola Liuzzo, who was an Italian American. She was murdered by Klansmen. And another one was a young clergyman by the name of John Raab, I believe, or Mr. Raab. I don't recall off the top of my head his first name, but they were both murdered by Klansmen. And certainly, Mr. Raab was white, and Viola Luzzo was Italian American, um, white Italian American, Caucasian. You know, so those are examples of white allies who are admirable. So I'm not sort of doing this almost like reverse thing, like within the black community, and I'm reluctant to use that term community, but black people who criticize Black Lives Matter, for example, would be called um, um, Uncle Toms. I'm sorry to use that term. I know it's an offensive term, but I'm using it for the context of education here. I'm not using it to be derogatory, but that's what they're called, you know. They're seen as traitors to the cause. So I am not saying, I'm not coming at this from a sort of like, all these white allies are traitors to the white people or something like that, because I'm not an identitarian, right? I don't consider any sort of loyalty to white people. I don't see myself as a spokesman for white people, and I wouldn't want any other white people to see themselves as spokespeople for me. I am white, and that's just a fact, right? But I'm very careful about not tribalizing myself in that way. But the criticism I'm making here is quite specific because I think these people are playing a game. I mean, not in a sense of for fun, but they are actively actually enabling minority racists. Let me be quite specific about what I mean here because I don't want to be misunderstood. Um, Individuals like Yusra Kobali, in my opinion, the writer Rennie Eddo-Lodge, and others who, as far as I'm concerned, are the worst sort of race baiters. Um, they should be marginal figures. They should be polarized because they are polarizing. Um, Priyamvada Gopal is another example at Cambridge. What's interesting about these characters is their apologists are not just black and Asian, they're white. Very often they're white. Freedom of expression. Everyone has the right to have their views. But I do really wonder about the mindset of white people who would defend someone who clearly has a lot of animosity towards them. Makes no sense. Um, it really makes no sense. And I think the only explanation is it's extreme virtue signaling, trying to show their woke credentials. Um, but an example of this is I mentioned Rennie Eddo-Lodge. She is the author of Why I No Longer Talk to White People About Race. Now, as I said in the previous video, whatever her arguments are, and I've read reviews of the book, I know what the general synopsis is, I know what the general outline of her arguments are. No, I haven't read it, and I would resent paying money for a book that insults me, you know, because the prefix of her argument, opening statement, is if you're white, I don't want to talk to you. This is just a ridiculous position to make. Now, here's the ridiculous thing. She was actually complaining that it's disgraceful that it's taken so long for a black author to get to the best-selling list. I'm not sure if that's actually true or not. She claimed this when she was doing very well commercially, and she is doing very well commercially. And again, I don't know if that's because her book is genuinely popular or it's kind of this word of the mouth effect. Um, like it's kind of an elevated popularity, I don't know. Um, but the basic premise is if you're white, I don't want to communicate with you. And she's complaining about, as she says, the lack of a presence for black authors. I'm sure there's many struggling white authors, but leaving that aside, strikes me as interesting that when she gets success, she lashes out. There's many, many struggling writers of all racial backgrounds who would love the sort of success that she is having right now. To have their book plastered over um, the front windows of the country's biggest book retailer, Waterstones. But, she's still complaining about racism, even though she's a successful author. Commercially speaking, I'm not saying that it's a deserved success, but commercially speaking, she has been successful. But, when I was looking at the BBC article about this, a lot of the supportive comments, there were a lot of negative comments, I might add. So again, this is a situation where the wider public might not align to what is supposedly the situation. But anyway, some of the supportive comments were from white people. Give this book a chance. It's such a great read. It really enlightened me about race. It really made me think. It really made me reflect. These sort of statements. It's, I'm sorry, but it's a bit pathetic in my opinion. I don't get shamed by anybody. Doesn't mean that I think I'm always right. Doesn't mean that I'm so obnoxious that I would sort of be like, oh, I'm better than everyone else or something like that. But if you're constantly flagellating yourself in terms of guilt, then I would suggest there's borderline mental health problems there. I remember seeing a photo at the time of the 2007 bicentennial of the abolition bill in 2007. There were a group of white people, and they were all white, actually put themselves in chains. I'm not making this up. And they walked through Bristol and I think London as well with these t-shirts saying "so sorry." Now, if I was black, I'd find that rather patronizing. I'd be thinking, what are you apologizing for? Do you want me to be thankful that you're groveling to me? I'd feel a bit strange about it. Um, Because I've had situations where people have been overly friendly and I've been a little bit wary about it. I've sort of thought, or they've been overly humble towards me and I've sort of thought, just makes me a bit uncomfortable. I think just let's just talk on a normal basis here. So that sort of white guilt I have no time for. I think it's pathetic. I do. I'm sorry, but I do. Um, the opposite, of course, is bad as well. White pride. I'm not interested in any sort of racial pride. I understand the context of Black Pride, like it was a backlash to racial discrimination and it was an empowering thing. But that's in a specific context. I think as a general thing, if you're black and your big calling card is Black Pride, I'm thinking, well, what's your merits as an individual? Tell me about your personality. Tell me about what you're interested in as an individual. It's like gay pride. You're gay, very good. But what's your music interest? What's your favorite books? What sports do you like? You know? So I don't want anyone to see me as a white guy, like that's some sort of achievement or flaw or whatever. It's just a fact. I do think though that the current situation is pushing people into identity politics. And it is pushing white people to be defensive. They've no choice. I mean, if you're white these days, basically you have to virtue signal or you have to stand your ground and say, well, no, actually, I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon. And that means a certain degree of identity politics in that. And I'm really, really not interested in being some sort of white identitarian. I'm not um, better or worse than any other white person. So this kind of relates to the last video I mentioned that I think the woke lobby are getting a free pass with their intolerance. I think that black racists and brown racists absolutely get a free pass. And that's concerning because if there isn't a consistency in standards, and if certain kinds of racism are okay, all that it's going to do is breed further resentment and polarization. And actually, it could lead to real racism because white nationalist types and white racists will feel further emboldened. Then they'll say, oh, well, this proves our point. And that will just encourage their racism. Just like one racism is fueling another. And that's really unfortunate because then, of course, innocent black and brown people will suffer from those white racists. This is a vicious cycle. The problem is, people who should know better are fueling one kind of racism. So it does, frankly, frustrate me very much that certain kinds of racists and race baiters, even if you think racist is too strong a term for Rennie Eddo-Lodge, and I don't think it is actually, because she's making a racist generalization. I don't think it's too harsh to say that she has a racist position. But even if you think that's too harsh a term, at the very least, she is a race baiter. At the very least. And I do think it's very sad that she is being lauded as some sort of heroine. She's done exactly nothing, nothing to bridge divides. So, I don't, as far as I'm concerned, she's not doing anything to help black people. She's just fostering resentment. She's just entrenching anti-white sentiments. So what's so admirable about her? I really don't see it. And again, if your position is, oh, well, you haven't read the book, she doesn't want me to read the book because I'm white. And she specifically stated, I don't want to talk to white people. That's not my target audience. They're the enemy. If you're white and you support her, you're a useful idiot as far as I'm concerned. It's your right, by the way. I'm not saying you don't have a right to do it because I'm not woke. I'm not interested in cancelling people. But I do question why you would support someone who resents you. for no other reason than the color of your skin. It's nonsensical. I mean, do you think she's going to recognize you as an ally? No. She's just going to see you as, okay, well, that's a white person that isn't, in the way. They're just white, okay, and they're not. Kind of reminds me, there's a scene in the film Malcolm X where this young white woman goes up to Malcolm X, played by Denzel Washington. She says, I'm sympathetic to your movement, and we're not all the same, and how can I help your movement? And he simply says, you can't, and just walks on. In other words, that sort of black nationalism, they weren't interested in white allies. And I think that's what white allies need to realize. Someone like Rennie Eddo-Lodge doesn't want your support. So you can virtue signal as much as you want, but she doesn't want it. And that's pretty clear from sort of ideology people like her put out. So people need to wake up and realize that what's being held up as something admirable is actually something very polarizing, very divisive, and in my view, will help no one.